Okay, I think we're live. And everybody, this is the first official episode of the Lost and Found Bin with Chick and SMQ. And it's pretty exciting stuff. Pretty exciting stuff. Our first episode.
It is super cool.
That's very cool. I think it's just giving something a name like this just kind of makes it more official. You know what I mean? Like we've got a thing now. It's kind of cool.
I think so
So
too. I hope people like get the name, but I think when they do get it, they'll like it a lot.
yeah, if you want, do you want to go ahead and share it? Because I mean, you came up with it, and I did a post earlier this week and readily said that it's your trademark. Although we're using it, do you want to explain what it means?
Well, we kind of like just in the last stream, we're talking about a bunch of different things, and I started saying, well, like the Mandela effect and all these different things is kind of like a lost and found bin because you don't know what's going to show up there, you don't know how it got there, you don't know what's going to go missing from there, and it kind of just like all encompass not just that, but all kinds of things we were talking about, like quantum physics as well.
That's cool. That's very cool. And then to come up with something like that and put that together, I think it's it's really good and it's important when the image fits immediately whenever you say something. That's when you know you've got something pretty good. So I like it. Okay, so this week I found something that was pretty trippy, and I wanted to save it for our conversation. And have you ever heard of the fallen astronaut?
The fallen astronaut? No, I haven't.
Okay, so apparently, and I think this is a Mandela effect, and um, I heard this on another Mandela effect channel, and what I'll do is, if need be, I'll try to find the history in my history. And my other interview, it ran over a bit long because I wanted to before I'm going to talk about it, and then I'll try to find the history of it to give proper credit where I found it. But apparently, there is now a fallen astronaut memorial on the moon that the from 1971 from the astronauts. They left a memorial there at the moon. Did you know about that?
No, I'm looking at it right now, and I have not ever seen that before.
Ever, right? Ever.
Ever.
Ever. And never not one. And I can assure you, when I was a kid, I was an absolute nerd, and I absolutely indulged in anything space or sci-fi or anything like that when I was a kid, and I can tell you, this is the first time that I've ever heard or seen anything remotely like this.
Me either. This is absolutely crazy. Because,
Okay, so I
oh,
think this, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. It's okay.
I think it's a Mandela effect. What do you think?
Oh, for me, it absolutely is. Because I was just about to say there, like when I was um, a lot younger and asking about space and asking people, like, no one could ever answer me as to why we only went to the moon 3 times and why it was so long ago. And then when this happened, it's like, no, there were all these other missions, and now there's this as well. And I like literally when I first looked at it like 5 minutes ago, or I was like, fallen astronaut, like did somebody die on one of these missions or what is this? And it seems to be just like a memorial, but I've never seen this before.
Right, and I saw this on a channel, and I've got my history up now. Like I said, I'm woefully unprepared here. But I heard this on, and it was part of a kind of a mixture with the channel. They had all kinds of different things they were talking about, and this was one of those things on the channel. And they talked about it, then they moved on, and it was like, whoa, hold on. So I had to go ahead and rewind and listen to this like 3 or 4 times to make sure I got this right. And sure enough, yeah, it's a thing and it's real and it's very, very, very strange.
It is. I'm looking at the Wikipedia of it right now, and apparently there are a bunch of different astronauts that died in various different situations, especially with these extra missions that they did. So,
Okay, the channel's called Suspect Sky, and the title is Mandela Effect Apollo slash voicemails MH370 slash Citigroup gun control slash. So basically, just it's Suspect Sky, and it's a just kind of a discussion where they just kinda go on tour with everything under the sun, anything alternative. So, yeah, it was it was really weird. It's very strange, and it's kinda freaky that is it me, or does this seem like kind of a bit of a jump in terms of the in terms of it being in your face, kind of am I reading too much into this?
No, it's super duper. I mean, obviously, for the people that, for them, it's always been there. It's not that shocking. But for anyone that has, it wasn't there until very, very recently or right now, it is. It's a very in your face change, historical change than what we've ever seen. Because as far as, we knew, like, they hadn't put they put that flag on the moon, but there weren't memorials and structures or anything that they told us about.
Yeah, and I remember people specifically talking about when we go back to the moon or point some people who are flat earthers, point if you can point at these far off galaxies, um, you know, what does hold on a second. Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Hold on, sorry. So what does it mean? And 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 here I'm reading it's talking about April 17th, 1972, the day after CBS anchorman Walter Cronkite referred to the fallen astronaut plaque. What? That's strange, right?
It's super strange. It's just
What?
like when we were talking about last time, like when you have to catch up with what just happened in the past. It's always really confusing.
It's so bizarre. It's so strange. And I just so now we've had to create an entire history was created around this particular plaque. And there's just so much infrastructure that has to go historically into creating something like this, and it's just really rocked my world. So how was your week?
It was pretty good. I started Twitter, so now I can
Mhm.
put my little posts up and keep up with other people. So that's really cool because a couple of people were asking me get on Twitter, get it going, so I could like announce live streams and stuff because I've been just doing it randomly. But apart from that, I've been more like researching into effects that I'd already kind of heard of rather than hearing of a lot of new effects. There are some that aren't very talked about, so I had those noted. But yeah, so not too crazy. I'm still kind of on uh, my semi vacation right now, so my channel's pretty quiet right now, but it will be louder
Mhm,
in
mhm.
mid-April.
That's awesome. Yeah, and everybody here, including myself, we appreciate you taking, some time to, from your vacation state, but sometimes doing something like this is kind of cool, right? I mean,
It
I
is super cool.
Yeah, I'm still reading. I'm sorry, I'm so distracted by this and so bizarre. They have journalists referring to it as recent as 2007. Okay, I'm gonna put my phone down because this one's freaking me out. I think this is the one of the most blatant changes that we've had in a very long time. Because if you think about it, the waves that have come or the shifts. Maybe that's why the shift was so powerful this last time, and I got sick and we're just now it's starting to bubble to the surface what changes in history we're dealing with now because this is a pretty major change to have a memorial on the moon. This is basically the first galactic memorial that we have, intergalactic memorial that we have.
Yep, and instead of you know learning about it all the way or hearing about plans for it to happen, it's coming in at the very end of the story, and all of a sudden, all of it already happened, and you have to go back and try and like how I'm not even sure how to say it, like retroactively, like look into what happened just now, way in the past.
Right? Exactly. And like it's just and it's an odd memorial. It's like a spaceman facing down or something or some kind of space, action figure. I don't know what this thing is.
It does look pretty strange. It's kind of like a stick man without any arms, like not the plaque piece, but there's like a little like what would you even call it? It's like a little
Like a
etching,
doll?
or yeah, the
Yeah.
Smithsonian is trying to load here for me to teach me something about it.
Oh, cool.
Um,
But yeah, I think this could be one of those things where we had the shift and you and I talked about how we felt it last week and how we felt it earlier in the month. Perhaps this was one of those things that came about the shift, and that's why it was so powerful, was because something this big was, this is a pretty significant change in history for me at least. So I don't know.
well, there could be more to come. It could be just a part of it. I can see the photo better now. It's like a small, a really small like spaceman with no arms on him, like a
Mm.
little doll left right beside the plaque, and a couple of, I don't know. It looks like they either buried something there or there's a lot of footprints all over it.
It's just weird.
I
The
was
whole
expecting to see like strange pictures or something on the plaque, but there isn't. It's just words. Because
Yeah.
usually there's weird symbols or there's like letters pressed together or that kind of stuff. That's like it. But this is a little bit more subtle in the actual like plaque.
Yeah, that's so bizarre. That is just so strange. Anyway, so I was wondering, I'm hearing ringing in my ear today, and I haven't since our last shift. Are you getting any signs or anything? And I don't know if it's, related, but I know that my ringing starts and then I start seeing repeating numbers and then we get underway.
Well, I had ringing last night for sure, and
Mhm.
it was bothering me a little bit, but it wasn't too crazy. And then just as you mentioned that, it turned 11:11 for me right now.
Oh. Oh. That's it, man. It could be underway. Yeah, and yesterday I saw at 4:44 was my first repeating numbers in a while. And I went, "Uh-oh, what does this mean?" And then this morning I've seen a couple repeating numbers, so I know that yeah, it's a potential. I don't know. Those are 2 of the signs that I get. But whenever a shift's really underway, I mean, I can't get away from the repeating numbers, and my ringing is just off the charts. And I'm not there yet, but who knows? Now that we're aware of it, we could be building to it.
Hopefully the as in like this is like a warning. So if something absolutely wild comes, we won't be too shocked. Not that this isn't wild, but like there's no telling how wild it can get.
Yeah, no, no, relatively speaking, you're right. Absolutely. Considering the sort of boundless way in which this could happen, you're right. You're right. This is relatively, tame that we've created an entire history of a memorial on the moon. Because if you even really just think about that on its face, a memorial on the moon, that's weird, right? That just sounds weird.
It's like that would be something that they talk about all the time. That
All
would
the
be something
time.
there'd be a million TV shows about and
Yeah.
documentaries.
Totally. Absolutely. There would be some sort of saying to it. You know that would be as hard as going back to the memorial on the moon, or, or make reference to, the person who has to keep guard at the memorial on the moon, or how lonely of a job it must be. Or I just in my head I'm already cooking up sayings that, how lonely is the job? Well, it's more lonely than being a guard of the memorial at the moon. That's
Yeah, there would be something like that. And I'd love to know if there is some saying like that we've just never heard, that is now an old saying, but wasn't, you know what I mean? That wasn't there
yeah.
before. But I haven't, often when these things happen, there's like big missing parts like that. There aren't like loads of old jokes about it or old sayings, or things are just there. And you
Mhm.
ask the people, tell me, inform me about this. And everybody just says, well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But it was definitely there, but I don't know anything about it.
Right, right. So so this week I'm gonna start asking people about this memorial and this fallen astronaut memorial. And I mean, I knew astronauts died, and I knew like one of the astronauts died on one of the launch pads, like before the rocket could even get off the ground. I knew that astronauts had died, but I didn't know that, obviously there was, and I don't think there was a memorial on the moon for it. So Um, yeah, it's just bizarre. And now I'm wondering if I've got to read the history of this thing. Did we have anybody die on the moon?
We probably did, because why would they put one there if everybody died on Earth?
Now that would be a plot twist. Actually having astronauts die on the moon and we have like bodies on the moon.
There's like a bunch of re-entry, parachute failure, automobile accident, aircraft accidents. There's one person that died of illness, re-entry pressurization failure. It doesn't say if anyone was on the moon. It says that in 1967, 3 people died in a fire, 3 astronauts, that is, and then more aircraft accidents. It doesn't actually say, um, like this mission in 1970 where somebody died of illness. It doesn't say like, did he get sick on the moon? Is that why they, or did he not?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was my big find for the week that I wanted to bring up here. That was just something that totally stood out among all the other things. So, I mean, this is like, I think, as big as finding a new and rare creature kind of level.
Yep. Like that kind of what would you even say? Just that I don't want to say junction point in history, but that new page of history where you have a memorial that's not on Earth for the first time, and it's not even big news.
That's what I'm saying. You would think, everyone on Earth that was growing up, especially if you were born after the moon thing or during the moon thing, it would be a huge part of history that we have a placard and a memorial on another, essentially out off of Earth, out in the galaxy, out there. I know it's our moon, but it's not on our planet. That's why it was kind of a big deal. You would think it would be a big deal, but it's very strange that I had to hear about it as one subject on a medley of subjects on one YouTube channel. That's how I heard about it.
I'm looking at under like fallen astronaut under shopping, and there are books written about it. You can get copies of the plaques. There's actually several books here. That would be really interesting to look at and be like, what happened? Why is this here? And see if that's mentioned in the book.
I think that's absolutely important. And that's sort of going back to we've got to invent or they, whatever. It has to have an entire sort of its own narrative line with it, its own narration, its own history, its own story. I mean, this is a thing now. This is a very big deal.
Yes, and I wonder if it's like completely come into the same space as us, because often when things don't have a lot of the blanks filled in about the history around it, those are the things that disappear again. It's like they kind of come into the place where you are and then they just like shift out. So I
Mm,
wonder if this, like, because there are books and things written like that, if more of the story will show up.
right. Because this almost remember those early waves of the Mandela effect where they were talking about the terrorist attack on the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah,
And right, this is at that level where it's like there's a whole piece of history you didn't know about, and it's just like what? That's to me that's what this comes in at that level of Mandela effect where it's like you have to do a double take, and it's so strange.
it is so strange. And people did not believe that, even though it was like in the history books. Like, even the people that are like, everything's the same, everything's the same. Um, when on the videos about that at the time, it was like a
Mhm.
year ago, they were still commenting like that didn't happen. You just don't have your history straight. You don't know, and all the same things. Like, Ellis Island is, nobody's ever talked about that. And I'm like, that's the only one everyone knows. Nobody
Right.
knows the other islands around there, internationally speaking. And like, maybe if you're from there, you know everything that's going on there. But I'm like, there's a reason why that was famous.
Mhm. And the Lindbergh baby as well, Were you part of the I'm part of the reality where they never found who did it. Are you part of that?
Yeah, they never found that. That was why it was famous. Like, I was just speaking to another person who's like also seeing that, and he was like, we were discussing among ourselves how like it wouldn't have even been famous if it had been resolved that quickly. It would have been another tragic, event.
Right, exactly. That's what made it the mystery. It's like the Mona Lisa. It was the mystery is what draws people in. That's the whole point, and it's pretty strange, very
And he
bizarre.
said the Simpsons episode where Grandpa Simpson goes, "I'm the Lindbergh baby," that still exists
Mhm.
because people could, show up and say that they were him because he was never found. And it doesn't make sense if he was found in a couple of days, like why that would be a joke.
Exactly, that's exactly right. That makes no sense, and it's like Dolly with braces. When with Dolly without the braces, that scene makes no sense whatsoever. There's no reason for them to have chemistry without her having braces.
And for her to stand there and do big smiles to like show off all of her teeth, it's like what does this mean without the
It
braces? Like
Yeah, and if you weren't a Bond fan and you saw Moonraker for the first time, you would be like, "What a weird, awkward scene. This is an awkward, bizarre scene, and it makes no sense." But if she had braces, then you're like, "Yeah, it's perfect sense. Yeah, oh, how cute."
like for me, I'd seen it a lot of times, but she had the braces, so then it was super weird to see it without that. Like you said, it
Mhm.
was like the scene is like for someone that always saw it without the braces, it'd be like, well, what were the writers thinking? Like, what was the point of this?
Exactly. And you know what this also tells me with this fallen astronaut memorial is that we're still in store for this thing is still happening in a big way. It's not tapering off. I mean, we created a huge chunk of history here with a memorial being on the moon. Think about that. Just that phrase. We have a memorial now on the moon. That's bizarre.
That's like the strange part of trying to wrap your head around. Like tomorrow, we could wake up and there could be a museum that was always on the moon. And if you question it, then oh, you're an idiot. You don't know anything. It's like no, like we've been following this. It wasn't there, and
Hey
now it's
man,
like it could be.
it's the sky shop, man. It's always been there.
Yeah, it's always been there. What are you talking about?
Come on, man, we'll go to the Sky Shop, it's only 6 hours away. It's bizarre. It's very strange, very strange.
Like I was
But
talking about with some of the other people who are noticing stuff about we were saying, well, they have to put all these different infrastructures down for like the new technological age that's going to eventually lead to singularity and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, well, actually, they don't. It can just be there and everyone will say it was built.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. That makes perfect sense, and I totally.
And
And,
that's so
you
weird.
but you've gotta be Mandela effect minded in order for that to sort of make sense, and you've gotta be thinking about it, in order for that kind of thinking to go, "Yeah, that makes sense."
I think it's like it's also disconcerting because things could change so fast because there's no lead up to like, oh, you see them building an infrastructure slowly and it gains traction. It's like, no, you've no idea. It can go from 0 to 100, or it can go from 100 to 0. You could think everything's going in one direction and then it'll go back in a completely different direction. And that's why I'm not so like I am freaked out about that because I think that's really crazy and I don't think that we're ready to go into something like that.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that because it can go in one direction, it can always go back completely the other direction. It can always go 180 degrees. So you're not destined to be headed in any particular direction when it comes to infrastructure and different things that different countries and buildings and things that aren't there.
Oh, man. That's just as frightening a prospect as where we're at right now then, and it going back. I mean, in a weird way, that's a good point you bring up about shifting back. I mean, if you could, would you wanna shift back to exactly the reality you were in?
I have thought about that a lot, and I think that there will be initially a massive relief, but then there will be a massive readjustment to the way things were before, where things didn't change unless in a natural kind of progression. Things didn't just go crazy and change.
Yeah.
And I think it would be weird having done this for so long now. You'd have to like go to a different like view about how prepared you feel about things. Like right now, like you always have to be prepared for anything. Whereas if you go back to how life was before, you can just kind of, I suppose, be a lot calmer. But also, things that are there are there. They're not going to suddenly disappear overnight. Whereas in this situation, if there's something you don't like, it might just not be there later. So it works both ways.
And I think too, it's sort of the you can't unbreak an egg kind of thing where even if we went back to that reality, there's always knowing that this happened to you and that this version of reality or this kind of rickety kind of scaffolding that creates reality, it is still out there. So even going back, it would be like a dream sequence or something, I guess.
It would, and it would give me like a totally different outlook because like we might have seen people that we thought they were just rambling or they were kind of crazy or kind of drunk or something, and maybe it's just they came back and they had all of this knowledge that nobody believes, and then that would be us basically. If we went
Oh
back,
yeah.
everyone would be like, "What are you talking about? Like, what is wrong with you? Is this a science fiction novel you're writing?" Like,
Well, think about it. If it was a couple weeks ago and I was telling people about the moon memorial, I mean, just that phrase, "Well, that's just as good as the memorial on the moon." People would say, "What are you talking about?" Like, "Well, there's a memorial, man. Didn't you hear about the memorial?" And just on its face, it sounds like someone is not well or not balanced.
yeah, and then to think that it might be a situation like how people treat different aspects of the truth community, like they might be onto something, but people are just like, well, that's just so outlandish that you must just straight up, I'm not even going to look into it. I'm just going to say you're crazy just off the
Mhm.
bat and dismiss you.
And think about this too, it is kind of interesting, I will say this, I don't know if you're a flat earther or not. I've never I'm sort of ambivalent about the whole thing actually because I know I'll never know, but I will say that I do appreciate the flat earthers' passion, and I appreciate their, commitment against scientism, and I think that the cool thing about this is it's almost like trying to create and reinforce things that, yes, we did go to the moon, and no, and yes, you are wrong. There's so much more evidence now that we went to the moon. It's almost I almost sense like it's a reaction to, people doubting that we went to the moon, them saying, "Not only did we go to the moon, we left a memorial there."
Yeah, but like, especially for me, it may be even more like it made me think about it even harder because I was like, why would, like, back at the very beginning when I was just trying to figure out, like, is it, they found some way to like rewrite things in real time or time travel or just like trying to figure out like what had they exactly done. And when I found out about all these extra moon missions, it seemed like advantageous to what they were trying to portray. And I was like, is this like a deliberate reality rewrite if such a thing was possible? That it would, it would be a rewrite in their favor because
Mhm.
people were saying, why did you only go a couple of times and why was it so many years ago? Like, what have you been doing since?
Yeah, that's a good point. It, like, puts a capstone on it, like, it ends the chapter more solidly now with this memorial there in some weird way.
Yeah, it definitely makes it a different thing because, like you said, they can say, well, we did all these missions and we have a memorial up there and we're probably working on, whatever crazy thing is next. We're going to put Elon Musk on Mars or something crazy. And we'll put a plaque up there too.
And this is almost more serious and more somber, and it reminds you of the dedication and people that passed away trying to achieve this goal, and it's almost shaming people who are flat earthers, as well as it almost erases the ridiculous stunt of Elon Musk when they sent the car up into space with the little spacesuit man, in the car, and it was just a real bizarre publicity stunt. Having this added to our collective narrative, this actually kind of changes it to a more serious, and makes space more somber that people had died, and there's a memorial there, like a World War II memorial that you would have, here or somewhere in Europe. It makes it very somber and very serious.
Yes, and you know what was so strange about the footage of the Elon Musk car? Like, Jason Christopher, he's like another channel, but he goes into more philosophical, like existential, like do we exist, and what are we, and all these like really interesting questions. But he called, I believe it was his sister, and asked, "Did you see like the Elon Musk, car floating in space?" And he asked her like, "Why are there no stars?" And she was like, "Oh, there were so many stars. It was so beautiful." And he was like, "Point them out for me." Because to
Mhm,
us, we were able to see it was just a black background and then like a piece of the earth and the car. But to the
mhm.
other people who are not seeing what we've seen, it's like, I don't even know. Like they were seeing something entirely different in that same footage. They were seeing amazing celestial stars and bodies and astronauts and things that, I'm sorry, asteroids and things that weren't there at all. And it seemed like some kind of strange either mind control or there's something really crazy going on with how we intake information.
Man, I think we broke the spell.
I think we did.
And
Like,
I think we broke the spell, man. I think we're out of it. Mm. And with my conversation with Darren earlier, um, it just made me realize the responsibility of knowing certain things and being able to see through a lot of things. And what you've just mentioned with people seeing what they want to see in a photograph, it's like we've seen the magic trick now, and we know what's up, and it's very strange. It's very surreal. I'm having a very surreal day.
it's super surreal to think that you can be looking at the same photograph or the same piece of footage and see entirely different things. And almost like you said, like the spell is broken, the cloud is lifted, the like the spirit of confusion is taken off of us, and we're
Mhm.
actually like seeing things and going, this looks ridiculous, this looks fake, this looks really chintzy. And other people are like, it's so amazing, it's blowing my mind. And we're just like, what are you seeing? That's not what we're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, you're able to actually see what they have to add, and they have to seed themselves into that particular picture like the stars. Having to add that themselves, their subconscious is working like a soldier to add that in there for them. So the narrative stays the same for them and stays cohesive and coherent. Well, versus you and I and everyone else in the Mandela effect community, that's been broken. And so once something like this fallen astronaut history comes around, it's just clumsily put into our reality. And then you can almost, if you see other alternative ways of thinking, you could almost see it as a response, almost like a partisan response to those alternative ways of thinking. And you could almost derive from it by putting this out here, what you're doing is you're insulting those who passed. And I could almost see that narrative coming out if flat Earth ever got any real traction in terms of it started really eroding, real numbers from the mainstream or the masses or those that are asleep. Because I think the thing about the flat Earth, I think they're the closest thing to doing that kind of breakthrough.
And I think that, like you said, it will become a much more difficult issue if it's talking about disrespecting people that died while they were trying to do all these missions. And it could be a way to like kind of shame people into keeping quiet with if
Mhm.
a different view on things. And I think that people should be allowed to have a different view on things and question, the scientism, because we know how much politics and fluff is in all that,
Mhm.
that we can't just say, oh, well, these guys said it, so therefore it's got to be the truth. It's good to question it and look into things and say, like, what makes sense to me? What rings true for me? And, like, for me, like, personally, for me, I'm just trying to figure it all out. Like, to me, there's so many crazy things going on that it's really hard to tell what direction anything's in. I mean, when I've seen airplanes just be still, passenger planes frozen in midair, and when there's things like that that are just glitching so hard, my mind isn't on, what is the surface shape? My mind is on what's going on in general here.
So I remember when those videos were out. You were able to witness that.
Yes.
Did that
That's
freak you out?
it was just as weird as any other part of this, where I was just like, this is what is going on, because it's like the thing is it's almost like magnetic repulsion. when you put the two ends of the magnets together and they just will not fit together. It was almost like there was a magnetic repulsion against the airplane and it wanted to move and it was like shaking a little bit like the magnets would, but it couldn't go anywhere. And it's really scary because it's so big and cumbersome. You're like, it's gonna fall, it's gonna fall, it's gonna fall. Oh my gosh, because it's only staying up by going forward and having the wind pressure, go under its wings and keep in the air. When it's still, you instinctively know, like, oh my gosh, it's gonna fall. And it was more than 10 minutes frozen just there in the air, not going anywhere. And I was terrified. And then it just started up and went on its way. And I breathed like this huge sigh of relief, like, oh my gosh, I thought I was about to witness something terrible. Whew. Scared me. It was bad.
Oh my gosh. That must have been terrifying. I couldn't imagine, because I haven't seen it yet, but I live not too far from an airport. I suppose I absolutely could see it one day.
I hope so, because it's like there's no way to describe how weird it is unless you're actually like looking at it.
Mm.
And the other people, like there were other people in the car with me at the time. Like the car was stopped and I was looking up at the sky. So it wasn't like, oh, the car was moving and it was some kind of optical illusion. Like the car was stopped and we were looking up at the sky and the other people in the car couldn't see what I was seeing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it's not moving. It's really low down. It's not moving. It hasn't moved, and I'm looking at my watch and it's still just staying in the same place. I was freaking out. Like there was nothing I could do because obviously I'm on the ground in a car. Like I can't, if it did go down, there's nothing I could do. But I was really freaking out. I was like, we need to get ready. I was ready to like call the emergency services and go crazy. And then the weird thing being like it didn't drop to altitude at all. And then it just started flying. Like it had never stopped. It didn't even dip down. It just kept going straight when it started moving again.
That's just terrifying. That is because then we're talking about physical things, defying the laws of physics, and you're witnessing that. We're no longer talking about historical changes. These are things that you're witnessing in real time. That's a whole nother level.
It is. It's like the guidelines of physics now.
Yeah. I just got that. That's funny. That's actually pretty good. The guidelines of physics. Yeah, and so much for getting, some sort of unified theory. You can throw that out the window. We can even get our physics now. You're right. It's a suggestions. I like that. That's pretty good. So, hey, have you ever heard of a researcher called Rick Clay?
I think I have. Like the name is familiar, but I'm not sure like what's his area of research.
Yeah, Darren was telling me about it, Darren Williams, and he was talking about how he was doing some sort of symbology kind of work. And I think he's passed away now, but he also did some sort of Olympic symbology or something to that effect. I'm going to do some research on him later today and probably tomorrow. So that should be pretty cool.
Huh. That is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little deviation from the Mandela effect, but really all this alternative stuff in one way or another, it's kind of all related, sort of. So,
It does seem to end up being related. I used to be super interested in ancient history, like obscured history, because I always wondered like what's being hidden, what's the real story. But now,
mhm,
to me, that whole thing is like it's the guidelines of history as well as the
mhm.
guidelines of physics. It's like, well, which history, which reality, which artifacts, which changes. So now it doesn't really matter anymore because like it could be anything depending on
And,
where you are at this
and
moment.
and you start getting into Anatoly Fomenko's work, you're talking, 1,000-year gap in there. So anything goes at this point.
Exactly. Anything go like that's the thing that it kind of forces, at least it forces me to let go of the past because I can't prove to myself what the past was if I can't trust the artifacts written or bones or anything. I can't, so I can't prove to myself in any way like what happened here, when did this happen, and then especially throw the countries as well into the mix. If a country was different, then their rulers were different, then their laws were different, then everything, how can you keep up with that?
And, a long time ago, I dismissed this, but it kinda plays into what you're talking about. They were talking about the invasion of Iraq and the invasion of different disturbances in various countries, and, one of the first things that happens with, the allies or anybody in NATO or Americans, the first thing they go for are the museums.
Yes, they do. And I've had
And
my thoughts about that for sure. And I've definitely argued with different people over the years about post World War II when we didn't want the Soviet Union to get all the top level academics from basically from Germany. So we brought them over here and then gave them these big jobs. And like it had a historical influence afterwards. And I wonder if they knew because they had all these programs looking into strange like alternative histories and strange, all kinds of strange everything. I wonder if it's like a memo note from those old days to keep a lot of things under wraps.
I totally think that that's a completely, a perfect line of thought. I think that's actually a correct I think what the way you're thinking is exactly the way it happened, and for s I don't know the reason why it's that way, but I totally think it's exactly the way you described it. They know about these artifacts, they know the real history, and they know whatever power you can derive from those particular artifacts. Absolutely, I totally believe that.
And I wonder, like, if it's 50% the politics of historians and the politics of scientism, and maybe the other 50% is there's all these huge things that will be so paradigm breaking and shaking that they don't want it to even come up. They're just like, nope, that's being put aside. The general public is not on the need to know list right now.
Well, that goes back to, like, why is it we still have fossil fuel cars? I mean, that's so out of date. You can just see that it's an out of date technology. You can sense that it's out of date.
And yeah, why? Why when there's like it's just that is super crazy. But I wonder if it's politics and the oil industry or who it is. I'm not sure because I'm sure they could find ways to make money out of other technologies too, especially if they brought it out first.
Yeah, and because everything else has advanced so much, and then with transportation, it's just this big stop about 40 or 50 years ago, and all we've been doing is refining the existing technology. We haven't made the I mean, it would still be like instead of you and I speaking this way, we would be speaking with a rotary phone. Just a finer version of a rotary phone. It just doesn't make any sense.
A really nice looking rotary phone. Yeah,
Yeah. Right, right. And
I
it's like
don't understand
communications have
either.
jumped, but yeah, but that hasn't. It's just bizarre.
There has to be a reason though. Somebody definitely put out a memo, and for whatever reasons it was agreed upon that this is going to stay static until we decide something otherwise, or it's playing into an agenda of social change. Because if we had already switched over to things, technologies that were much cleaner, how could you push for? Oh, the place is so dirty. We need to have a complete social overhaul, United Nations style.
Mm, wow. And I didn't think about that. Maybe this technology is binding us to this way of life on in order to keep order, maybe, because they know it would be that disruptive or they don't even like the leap would go from a car to basically some sort of, magnetic, Land Rover thing that is 5 or 6 feet off the ground that is noiseless, and it would completely rewrite and undo the need for roads and bridges and or maybe it's something like teleportation where it's absolutely where things like borders and militaries are absolutely turned upside down, who knows?
Yeah, it could. Yeah, there could be those repercussions, and also like we talked about modern day feudalism, you have to keep your serfs busy earning the money to pay for the gas to put in the car to get to the job to earn the money.
Yeah, it's like a real live role-playing game, only they're literally doing that on purpose, and it's almost burning up it has nothing to do with the money, and it has nothing to do with the resources, it's burning up our attention, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, burning up the most important resource that we have, which is the amount of time that we get. And if you're always too busy, then the odds that you'll have time to think about anything or question anything or even look at the reality stuff, it's not going to come up because your emergency, bills are due and all this stuff, and you got to keep going, you got to keep working. And it's the perfect thing to keep everybody busy till they're so beaten down that they don't care anyway.
And think of it, transportation is tied to that. Transportation has had no great leaps, but communications have. Everything else has had a great leap into, even I would go even medical technology since the 50s and 40s, but transportation just a dead stop. And think about it, you have to use transportation to get in and out of whatever location it is for your job. So it's part of that sequence that's needed to burn up your time, to burn up your attention, to burn up, yeah, that only resource that no matter how rich you are, well, allegedly, you're not
Alleged,
given.
you only
Right.
get so much of it. We're not
That's allegedly.
sure, but that's what they told us.
Exactly. Yeah, allegedly. Yeah, yeah. But, yeah, it's so strange, so strange, and that even ties into the moon thing. Why didn't we go back? Well, because we haven't, we still have booster rockets that rely on basically a big firecracker. That's why we perhaps haven't gone back because, the transportation on Earth hasn't gotten any better since the '60s.
It's like if they have some alternative technologies, though, they should put it into those kind of departments, like space and like these other things. Even if they don't, but maybe they're afraid if they do that, then it'll become closer to being publicly available, and they're not ready for that social shift.
Yeah. Where people could, like you and I just ask the question, "Hey, why don't you do a smaller commercial version of that, and then you can cut out the car?" Yeah, it could be that.
And they're like, no, because we've had these things in place to tax you per mile that you're going to drive. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, that won't be necessary because we can just switch to clean technologies now if you have them. They're like, no, we have all these other things set up. Check out our Agenda 2030. It's
Mhm,
like, we
and
don't
imagine
need your Agenda 2030 if we already have the answers.
and think of cities. Imagine if cities became obsolete, where you didn't have to, transport your way to a central hub where everybody comes together to work. What if the paradigm shift there is so unimaginable? It would be like someone from the medieval times seeing the 21st century. It's just completely unimaginable.
Yeah, um, I think that people enjoy having their own space. Like I know people love being in cities too because there's more hustle and bustle and things going on. I think people would be much more agreeable to like having their own space and being able to work remotely or work from home, or like especially with computers that you can put your work from basically wherever you are. But I do see a lot of with the social planners, their idea about smart cities, smart grids, that everyone's going to be packed in together into small apartments. Like you're going to have social problems because people don't like that. And also, we think that we are super duper advanced, but there's something we haven't beaten, and that's disease, which is definitely has been evolving the whole time. And I'm like, if you pack everybody in together, and you don't keep everything super duper clean, like there's reasons why people don't live on top of each other like that.
Absolutely.
It's dangerous. It doesn't matter how rich you are, or how cool you are. Like disease is not a respecter of persons. It doesn't care.
And, they have those micro apartments now that are like 250 square feet that they're selling in different cities now.
Yeah, that to want everybody to move into that kind of situation in the future to like, save the planet and stuff. And I'm like, why don't you just use green technologies and leave things as they are and not even worry about it?
I know. That algae technology is promising, but it's just I don't know, it's so bizarre. It's 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 like this plaque on the moon, see? It just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. It's really, really crazy.
Hmm.
I'm not sure
Alright.
what the point of like directing populations and doing all this social engineering is when you bring in reality shifts into the situation, because it's like for some people, I know there's been a lot of people saying to me that they remember 8 billion as the population. Some people have been saying to me it was 6 billion, and then for myself and a bunch of others like me it was 9 billion people, and now it's 7 billion. So you don't need to reduce if people just disappear.
Well, I remember when it got to the 6 billion mark, and that was a big deal, and people sort of panicked. It was kind of a, "Oh my gosh, 6 billion." So that's a little different version there. Interesting.
It
How
was
many is it now?
it's 7 billion now.
Oh, weird.
So in this place, it's 7 billion, and like for us, like when it was 9 billion, there were 2 billion people living in China. China was much much bigger, and the whole place was much much bigger. The circumference was 36,000 miles of the Earth, and now the circumference of where we are now is 24,000. So everything's so
Yep.
much smaller. There's less people, but I'm like, when everything was so much bigger, um, I guess it was almost at the point of like you're 6 billion. People were like 9 billion is a lot. We're gonna have to figure something out. But we like people weren't completely panicked yet. They were at the edge of panic. They're like, when we reach like 10 or 12 billion, it's gonna get pretty packed up in here.
That's so bizarre. That's so bizarre how the two are definitely linked, the size of the Earth and the population. Could you imagine if that is really linked and these are two at the macro level, they're both sort of collaborative organisms, both, the human population as a whole and the Earth.
Wouldn't it be amazing if, yeah, if that was the situation and people, we didn't need social engineers to make all these changes because maybe reality is able to make these changes by itself without us interfering?
That's totally plausible. Totally plausible. Anyway, I'm just, if you don't mind, I'm going to keep it to an hour this week if you're okay with that, and we could
Yeah, for
probably
sure.
go next week for yeah, because one, we blew our hour away like it was nothing, and two, that interview was incredibly intense, so I am beat. So do you want
I'm
to do
sure.
same time, same place next week?
Yeah, let's do that. I'm looking forward. I haven't seen his interview with Darren yet, so I'm gonna go watch that after this.
All right, sweet. That's great. All right, everybody. I think we're gonna take off for now, and same time, same place, and we'll work on trying to keep this a regular thing like a real show. I'm pretty excited about this. So, I guess if that's, do you have anything else?
Just thank you everybody so much for tuning in to the Lost and Found bin.
With that, I couldn't think of a better way to end it. See you later, everyone.
Bye bye.